right, and now we're going to talk about how we help families and what we educate them with. And so let me ask you, what is your financial independence number? Is it something that you've ever thought about? Probably never something you've sat down and looked at. But let's say if you needed to be able to replace your income, how much do you think you would need? If you were to stop working tomorrow, how much income do you need actually to come in? And so what we know is that we can get basically a 4%. It's the traditional golden rule for the industry, is you can live off of 4% of whatever you have saved. So if you need $40,000 a year in income, what that means is you need to have $1 million saved. If you're a millionaire, you've got to live off of $40,000 a year in income. So you can equate that to whatever it is to you. And so what's beautiful about the plans that we put in place, that $1,500 to $2,000 that most companies charge, this is what it does, is it tells you what your financial independence number. It will calculate where you are and where you want to go and help you fill in those gaps. So it's going to teach us how much do we need to actually be saving a month for whatever goal that it is, depending on when I want to retire, how much time I have to get there, and how much time I plan to spend in retirement. And then it'll also tell us how much income we'll be able to live off by the time we get there. And possibly if you have kids or a family or somebody, a charitable organization, whatever it might be, that you would like to leave something to, how do we leave those assets to future generations so they're not held up by taxes? And so the first part that we need to learn and understand is rate of return. Are you familiar with compounding interest? Have you ever heard of that before? A lot of us don't get taught that in school. And so what that means is it's going to be how quickly our money doubles. The challenge is most of the time we're putting our money into a bank or something like that that gets a very low rate of return. I think Bank of America right now is like 0.01%. So what that would mean is if we were to calculate that, Albert Einstein brought to light what's called the rule of 72. And so you take whatever your interest rate is and you divide it by 72. So what that would mean that a 0.01% interest rate, it would take 7,200 years for us to double our money. That's just way too long. But let's say the bank was being generous and they were going to give us a 1%. That means it would take 72 years for that money to double. So if we were a 29-year-old and we had $10,000, 72 years later, we would now be 101 and we'd have $20,000. So we're 101 years old, we can finally stop working and we have $20,000 saved. What's the challenge with that? We're too old and it's not enough money. It took way too long. Okay, so we're in agreement that we need to have it grow faster. So what if we could get a 4% rate of return? Now that money is going to double every 18 years. 72 divided by 4 is 18. So if we're same 29-year-old, same $10,000, but now that money is going to double every 18 years. So 29 to 47, we now have $20,000. At 65, we now have $40,000. So what's significant about the age 65? What are most people thinking about? Yeah, they want to stop working. So if we're 65 years old and we have $40,000, how long can we stop working for? Well, in our example earlier, if we had $40,000 and we need that as income every single year, well, we can retire for basically 1 year. So now we're 66, we're out of money, what do? We've got to go get a job or work at Walmart or do something like that because we can't call our bill collectors and say, hey, I'm sorry, I can't pay on my mortgage anymore. Can you just forego that? It doesn't work that way, right? So we've got to figure out a way to still be able to take care of our living expenses. We kind of joke about that, but that's reality for most people. Most people have to work into the years where they would want to be spending their time with their grandkids or traveling or doing whatever it is because they didn't prepare for these things. So let's say we could get a 10% rate of return. What if we could get this to grow a little bit faster? Well, now at 10%, it takes 7.2 years for that money to double. So same 29-year-old, same $10,000, but now by the time they're 65, they have $320,000. Not because they worked harder, not because they changed careers, not because they did anything different other than they allowed their money to work faster for them. And if we look and we were willing to wait a little bit longer, which most people are doing now, if we waited till 72, we would get another double. So we'd have $640,000, which is even better numbers. So don't you think you could retire a little bit more comfortably with $640,000 versus $20,000 at 101? Big difference. And the only difference being is understanding the law of compounding interest. Now the next part of that, usually the question I get is, well, how do we get this thing to grow? Doesn't that mean I need to take on more risk? Well, let's talk about it. So there's really 3 different ways. The first is fixed, which basically means maybe a CD or something like that where we can get a guaranteed 1 or 2%. The challenge is it doesn't grow very quick. So we end up getting a small rate of return and we kind of just go broke safely. kind of a challenge with that. But if we want this thing to grow, there's a couple different ways we can do it. First way we can do it is variable, which has high highs, but it also has low lows, right? So we can do great one year and then do terrible another year. And if you're old enough like me, you've experienced a couple of those now, maybe 2008, and then we just had that as well. And I remember not sleeping well through that. So maybe that's you, maybe that's not. Maybe you like having a little bit more risk, and that's okay too. But there's also a third route. It's called indexed. And what that means is we can still get double-digit rates of return, but it locks in our principal and interest. And so now we're not worried about losing money. So when we come into another 2008 or 2009, we don't have to worry about losing 40% of our assets because it's protected. And then as the market goes up, we go back up with the market. So it looks more like a stair versus the elevator going up and down. Make sense? So which of those is a best fit for you? And we offer all of them. So whatever it is for the best fit for that client, we can help them with that. And the third thing that we really need to understand is taxes. And so when we're putting money away, if it's going into maybe a CD or something like that, it's in the taxable category, which means every year we have to continue to pay taxes on that. So we get a little bit of growth, we pay taxes. We get a little bit of growth, we pay taxes. Very difficult to build that way, build wealth that way. The second way is tax deferred, which can also be great. This is our 401ks, our IRAs, those kinds of things where we put the money in pre-tax, it grows tax-free, but then when we retire, we have to pay taxes on all of it. So that $1 million that we needed to save for our $40,000 a year in income, we now have to pay 20 or 30%, depending on what state you're in, maybe 50% of that as far as we're gonna have to pay that in taxes. So that $1 million that we thought we had saved is actually maybe $700,000 or $500,000. So we've got to equate for that coming into retirement as well. Or we can do it in tax exempt, which means we are going to put the money in after tax dollars, it's going to grow tax free and then come out tax free. So that $1 million that we actually have saved is going to come out as $1 million. We're not going to have to worry about paying taxes of that into the future. So my question to you is, are you taking advantage of all of these different strategies to prepare for your retirement or whatever it is that you're trying to accomplish? And if not, we should probably get together and set up a time to go through what's called a FNA. It's a financial needs analysis. It allows us to actually put that together. Again, there's no charge for that, where traditionally it's $1,500 or $2,000, but we can help you put a plan in place and give you some guidelines. Don't you think it would be a lot easier to hit your goals if you actually knew how to get there, if you had the roadmap? Would you ever hop in your car and not turn on the GPS and just hope you got somewhere? No, that would be silly, but that's what most people do in their financial life. So let's set up a time to do your financial needs analysis.